Hi, this is Paul Solt from iPhone Dev TV, and I want to do a real quick video on Xcode 5.1. This is the latest version that just came out. If you didn't grab it yet, go to the App Store, and then if you go to your Updates tab, you'll see it there. Now, I recently did this, so it's already on my system, but that is where you want to go. Now, this fixes some of the new things in auto layout, and let me show you what it does. I've got it over here. I am looking at the what's new in Xcode, and here we can see the changes for Xcode 5.1. The biggest change that I see here that affects what I do is the changes to the auto layout constraints and editing tools. They've actually fixed some of the bugs. Recently, I did a little video on how to work with the top layout guide and the bug with that, and they fixed that. So that's no longer an issue as long as you upgrade to Xcode 5.1, and you'll be good to go. They've also added some additional information on how to do the control dragging, which is pretty cool. They've added some new menu options. You'll see underneath equal widths, you'll see the aspect ratio. And they did take away some of the things, and I'll show you how that works in Xcode. So it's a little bit more challenging, I guess, to add relative constraints to the container if your image fills up the whole space. And then the other thing is they have editing the constraints. And then this is just another little guide. And one of the cool things now is that you can select the first item, the relation, and the second item. So there's new constraint controls. And these are things that you had in code but didn't have in the interface designer. And so this is a step up. It allows you to set some different things and really customize things more so in the editor. So that is this other view. Let's jump right over to Xcode. We're just gonna create a new Xcode project, and I'm just gonna jump through this real quick. So it's gonna be a single view because that's the easiest one to start with. And auto layout update 5.1. Okay, so that's what we'll call it. We'll just go with my default settings for now. And I'll put this in my projects folder. And now we can jump over to main.storyboard. And in here is where I can show you that the bug is fixed. All we need to do to reproduce that bug is to drag out a view. And we can just position it here. I'll make it so it's smaller than my screen. And we're going to color it a certain color. So we'll make this one red, just so it stands out. And I want to position it right here. Now, if I were to run the app right now, I hit the hotkey Command R, it will start the iPhone app. And now we see that we've got the proper layout. Now, the issue we had before is when we did this control drag or the right click and drag, and I let go up here, we would get an issue when we hit the top space to layout guide. So when I click on this, it now actually adds the right constraint, and it's right here. You can just barely see it. It's this little thing that pops up. So it's no longer adding a constraint that goes from the bottom to the top. It's adding the one on the top, which is excellent because once we add the other constraints that we need. Now this is where things changed a little bit. Normally when I was in Xcode 5, I could just drag over and get the leading space and the trailing space, but that's no longer the case. In order to get that, I either have to go diagonally up or I have to go over to our view here, which is the parent view, that's this area. But this will give me all the constraint options. So I find this to be the easiest way to add multiple because you can hold the shift key down when you're adding. And so in this case, not only do we want the top space to bottom layout guide, but we want the leading space, the trailing space, and then in this case, we'll do bottom space. So we'll just do them all here. And so that's going to add all of our constraints, and we should be able to see them here. I might have added a duplicate top space. Yeah, we have two of these. For whatever reason, it didn't show up. That must have been a glitch. I knew I had added it, but it wasn't visualizing that it was there. So let's go ahead and just delete that one. And now we've got our constraints set. So this is going to squish it when I do a 3.5 because I've set a hard constraint on the bottom. So we're going to see that this view isn't going to be the same size. So it's a little bit squished, but if we switch over to our 4-inch, and we rerun it, we should see the same size here. And the important part that I really care about is that this view is no longer being squished underneath the status bar. It's no longer being pushed off screen. It's exactly where I want it. So that is the update for the Xcode 5.1. It fixes some of the auto layout constraints. The other things we can do is we can click on a constraint, and then on our sidebar, if you pull this out, you can now customize all of these different things. So here we could change it so that this was our bottom layout dot center X, or its bottom. Those things wouldn't really make sense. Well, they might actually be the same thing. I'm not really certain. It would make more sense if I throw another view on here. So let's get some kind of view here, and we'll just do a smaller one. We'll make this like a blue color, just so we have something to go against, and we'll delete this bottom constraint so that we can have another view here. So let's go for blue, and then we'll set up a vertical space. Now for the blue, I want to set up constraints to the parent view. Now since I have space to drag to the left, I can drag to the left and do the leading space to the container, and then I can drag to the right and do the same thing. But I'm gonna have to do each one of these separately. So now I need to do the trailing space to container, and then we can do the bottom space to layout guide. So now we've got this new constraint set up, and in this case we're not going to the bound, so we're going to need to set the width and the height. And the easiest way to do that is to drag a diagonal line inside the view and do width and height. And here we see the aspect ratio. So I could set the aspect ratio, and it'll add that craziness. So far, I think you want to be careful when you set these aspect ratios. Let me move this over. Have to select the view controller and then drag it. Okay. The aspect ratio is a little bit weird. I don't know if I'd always use it, and I really want the width and the height. So let's go with that. And we rerun it. And now we see the view is appearing here. Now the cool thing is I can grab this little view here, and we can see that it's the view.top. Now if I named these, it would actually be a lot easier. So let's call this one blue. And you have to click slowly to rename. And then this one we'll call red. And so now we'll be able to differentiate when we look at the actual constraint. So here we see it's blue top and red bottom. Now this gives us control that we had normally in code, which I haven't done any videos about the code just because it's a little bit more complex, and I want to focus on the interface. But here we can do some interesting things that allow us to create the constraints between different attributes. So I could make it so that the bottom is equal to red's bottom. And so what that's going to do is it's going to add a constraint so that it pulls it down. And so right now it's acting a little wonky. I'm not sure why it's still offset. Maybe, because we already have a constant. So if I wanted the bottoms to be equal, we would want the multiplier to be 1, and then the constant is going to be our way to shift up and down. And so we could do a negative constant, so negative 40 would make the red one go down. In this case, for whatever reason, it's going to randomly move some stuff around. You might have wanted the red one to have a constant width, and before, if you wanted that, I would have set a height constraint. And now if we tell I don't know if I can grab it, we're saying that the bottoms of the blue and the red are going to be the same. If I wanted this to be negative 40, the red should maintain its, and it doesn't. Okay, well that's awesome. I'm also not sure if one of these, it doesn't look like you can switch the order of blue and red, but sometimes in code I've seen that the order of this does make a difference. So maybe it's how you create the constraint, taking which one gives precedence. So maybe I wanted this up here, and did it remove that constraint? Oh, it just embedded it. So that's another issue. Yeah, it removed the constraints. You got to be careful when you drag views into another view, because now you can see the hierarchy that the blue and red are not siblings. They are now, the blue is a child of red, and we don't want that. So I'll hit Control or Command Z to undo. And now we're back to where we were. So we can play around with these constraints a little bit. Right now it's showing that we have an issue. So if I were to run this, we're probably not going to see, we may see it. It looks like we see it, but we have a warning in the bottom. So that's something we would have to fix. And that's because the constraints are not set up correctly. And I don't want it to embed that. So these are some cool things that you can do with the constraint. And once you start moving things around, things can get a little bit wonky. But here's the constraint that we were playing with. If I double click on it, we can edit the value, and I can just set them equal. And then if I say I want to update the frames, we'll see where it pops up. So it moves it up if I update the frames. So here we have them. They're still siblings. I have to be careful when I touch them in Interface Builder, otherwise they can become a child. If I just click on it, I was noticing that it sometimes just became a child, but it's not doing that right now. So doing layers where views are on top of another view is a little bit more challenging, and it's easy to mess up in Xcode. But those are some of the new cool things you can do with these constraints. And if we go back to that vertical space, instead of doing, it's not the right vertical space. I want the, there, you just tab through these, you can see the different constraints. This is the one I was looking for. Sorry, it's bottom alignment. I guess it changed it. It wasn't a bottom alignment before, but it became one. Oh, here we can. Oh, I didn't see this option. So here we can reverse the view first and second item, which I think would alter the way that it would behave. So if I added the -40, now it moves the red view up. Okay, awesome. Or if we did 40, would that move the red view down? That moves the red view down. So you can play around with these. This is control that you had in code before, and now you get it here. Anytime we have a non-blue thing, we had to fix something. And so here, I'm going to see if we can just update our constraints. Or it wants me to reset something. Let's get rid of that one. So we had a conflict there, and we want to update the frame. And we still don't have enough now to describe the bottom. So I'll add bottom space to bottom layout guide. And now we've got some weird stuff going on. So just play around with it. And I've embedded the view again, so we don't want to do that. But these are some cool relationships that you can now set up with the Xcode 5 and do a little bit more that you weren't able to do. And it also fixes that layout glitch with the top layout guide. And that was really frustrating for me because I would create a view and I thought I understood it. And the problem is I thought I understood auto layout, and then things didn't work as I expected. And it was because it was a bug. It wasn't because I didn't quite understand it. There's still some peculiarities with auto layout, and you just have to work with it to sort of understand how it works. So go ahead, create a new Xcode project, put some views out, try to lay them out. You want to right click and drag to your top view, and you can hold shift and then select multiple constraints. So add some constraints, try to set up some relationships between your views, and then you'll be on your way to understanding how auto layout works.